Okay, right. We've had a great question got sent through for Coach's Couch, which I think is going to help a lot of athletes out. So I thought I'll do a quick video here to talk you through some of the ideas. Question goes like this. It's from Doug Reynolds in Colorado. It says, I'm looking for guidance on following average power or normalized power. Which should I use when pacing a race? I'm doing Ironman Canada, and there's several very long hills and descents in it. Okay, so Doug's question is really important because especially on a very hilly course, what we're going to find is using the correct one of these power metrics is really going to help you out, and the other one's really going to hold you back. So first, let's talk a little bit about what average power is and what normalized power is and the difference between them. So first up, if we go out for a steady state ride and we just roll along at about the same power, the average power of that ride is going to be pretty much whatever you were rolling along at the time. So say you were rolling along at around 200 watts, the average power for that ride is going to be about 200 watts. So when we start introducing hills into the equation, it becomes a little bit more complex. Because every time the road goes up, you're spiking your power. It might go to 350, 400 watts. And then on the downhills, your power is going to drop to almost nothing if you're freewheeling, and certainly very low even if you're soft pedaling on the way down the hill. So if we take an hour's ride where we're going really hard uphill, going really easy downhill, really hard uphill, really easy downhill, the average power might not be very representative of how the ride actually feels. And that's where normalized power comes in. Normalized power is, if you like, it's a weighted average. It represents the fact that the harder you go above threshold, the exponentially bigger cost physiologically to your energy system. So every time you spike your power, and in particular, every time you spike your power up above threshold, it has an exponentially higher effect on your energy and how tired you feel afterwards. So it's another way of measuring fatigue. If we take a really simple example of this, let's say you were to do a 20-minute ride where you do 1 minute at 400 watts and 1 minute at 0, just resting. The average over that is going to be 200 watts. So for an average with an FTP of 200 watts, they're going to have done the 20 minutes at their FTP, but the physiological cost of doing a minute at double that and then a minute's recovery is going to be much, much higher. If we take another example and we say, if you ride up a hill for 30 minutes and you freewheel back down the hill, putting nothing out for 30 minutes, the average power is going to be very different to how that feels after doing a 30-minute effort up the hill and a 30-minute average and a 30-minute nothing on the way down. So normalized power is a really clever algorithm. The computer does the maths and says, we'll recognize the fact that all these spikes in power actually make us feel much more tired at the end of the ride than the average power number might say. So let's take an example of this. Say you get back from your hour's ride and you've been going hard up the hills and doing nothing on the downhills. The average power might come out at 200 watts, but the normalized power, to reflect the fact that all those spikes really, really drain you and leave you feeling very fatigued, the normalized power might be 240, 260 watts, maybe even 280 watts. It's not unusual for that normalized power to be 15 to 20% above what the average power is. So the drawback of using average power for pacing a long distance triathlon is it doesn't give you anywhere near as accurate a number as if you use normalized power. So normalized is the thing that we want you to use. We take an example of an athlete who's just going off average power numbers on the Garmin. They might get to the end of the bike leg and think that they've targeted the power number they wanted and the average power's given them that, and they might be thinking happy days. Especially on a hilly course, what you might find is that normalized power is 10%, 15%, maybe even 20% higher than that, and that represents how it feels to our body. So in effect, your body's saying, you might very well have ridden at 200 watts, but I feel as though you've ridden at 240, 260, 280 watts. If the power number showed that on the Garmin, you'd be thinking to yourself, crikey, I've gone far too hard. So the spiky nature of the power spikes going up and down have an exponentially bigger effect on us than we think they may be. Now, in the question here, Ironman Canada has got some very long, draggy climbs that can be 20, 30, 40 minutes long. So what I'd say here is, Doug mentioned in his question, he was targeting 65% of his FTP. That's what he's worked out he needs to stick to be able to have a good run. So because of the long nature of the hills, it's unlikely that he's going to be able to hold himself to that 65% going uphill. And it's also likely he's going to get recovery as he goes down the other side. And so, yes, he can go a bit harder than 65%. My rule of thumb here is allow yourself about 10% extra on those long, draggy climbs to account for the fact that you're going to be putting out much less power on the downhill, and you're still going to end up with a normalized power somewhere around that 65% that you're looking for. So the 10% extra on a long, draggy hill is about where you should be shooting for holding your power. If you're racing shorter distance than Ironman, if you're racing 70.3 distance, you can maybe allow yourself a little bit more of a jump there, so maybe 10 to 12% rather than just 10% extra. But again, try and limit yourself to 90% of FTP on those really long, draggy hills, because no matter what the numbers are telling you, we want to keep you up below that sort of 90% area to really give you a good chance of running well off the bike. Okay, guys, I hope this has clarified it. So in short, you want normalized power numbers on your Garmin rather than average power. And it's those normalized power numbers that are going to affect how you feel, and that determines how you're going to run off the bike.